And you, Christian, experienced that more stringent nature yourself. You were actually supposed to interview the Iranian president there in New York at the UN. Tell us about why this didn't happen.
Well, Brianna, it's very unsettling because we were going to have the first exclusive here in New York. He'd already done an interview in Iran with 60 Minutes where the headscarf was also an issue. But there, because it is the custom, one always does wear the headscarf when one's there. That's just, otherwise you couldn't operate as a journalist. Here in New York or anywhere else outside of Iran, I have never been asked by any Iranian president, and I have interviewed every single one of them since 1995, either inside or outside Iran, never been asked to wear a headscarf. After hours of getting this interview ready, having pre-talks with the president's officials, giving them sort of an idea of what we wanted to ask about, not questions, obviously, but an idea. They knew exactly we want to talk about the nuclear deal. We want to talk about Iran's support for Russia against Ukraine. And most importantly, we want to talk about the violation of human rights. At the very end, they come up with this, you know, it's a religious month of mourning and we need you to wear a headscarf. And I very politely declined on behalf of myself and CNN and female journalists everywhere because it is not a requirement, and it was lobbed at us at the very last minute. And very unfortunately, they decided to pull the interview. So it's a problem, and we've had, you know, for instance, the foreign minister of Sweden and others, you know, criticize these protests and the crackdown, the violent crackdown in Iran, and saying women's rights there need to be respected.
How do you read this, Christian? Do you read this as fear of what's happening on the streets in Iran? Obviously not fear of seeing your hair, because that's not what it's about. It seems that they didn't want to talk to you about what's happening right now on the streets.
Well, look, I can't prejudge that because they told us that we had the interview. It was very difficult to get the interview, there's no doubt about that, and a lot of work went into it. I think if I could just guess, and how do I read it, I think that he did not want to be seen with a female without a headscarf in this moment, either because he calls it a religious month or because people would say, how come he's sitting down with a foreign journalist who's not wearing a headscarf, and yet inside Iran they're cracking down on young women who are not wearing their headscarves. But the fact of the matter is the women are wearing their headscarves. Sometimes in protest they take them off. But the authorities, and I know because I've been there and seen it, each year they change their boundaries in their lines. Sometimes the headscarf has to be here. Sometimes it's okay if it's here. You just never quite know what the parameters are. And these women have fallen foul of that.
And Christian, I have to let you go here. We're running out of time. But just very quickly, when you see those protests on the street, I think there's a tendency for people to say, oh, this time it's going to be different.
I'm not sure about that. When you say different, some people I know on the outside say, is this the end?
Right.
Is this a counter-revolution? But I do not think that's the case. I don't think the numbers are there. And I do know, because I've experienced it myself, for instance, in 2009, that the regime has all the power and will crack down very hard.